Well, that'll be a question. Now, for me to take over.
Share screen. If it's allowed.
Should be allowed. Should be one co-host. So
where am I? Here we go. Hi.
Beautiful.
Hopefully, everyone can see that okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Well, obviously, on the back of kind of what we've sort of discussed over the last couple of presentations, and the theme behind this was quite deliberate about sort of get to this point. Obviously, we talked about case studies and pathways, and then looking tonight my time, but today for you guys, a little bit kind of like on the back of what UC just said about. So it's more some around the sports science, sports medicine stuff that what I've spent a lot of time in sort of working with athletes. And I think a lot of this stuff, I think that the earlier that we can expose the players, the athletes, however you want to call them, to kind of this type of information, I think the better, this is just my view, the better it is, which I'll go through a little bit in more detail. And obviously there's many areas, and Evan just thinking just then, there's a few things that I haven't missed out, but there's a few things that we'll go more into in the next couple of months as well. So I guess something I started with is obviously use and Hank, the guy's got like a 3D system, and there's many different systems on the market now. And I think the important part about any type of measuring device is actually understanding what it actually measures. I think there's a lot of devices out there, like whatever, it's a TrackMan, FlightScope, whatever it may be, or different 3D systems that I think it's important for the user. So we have a better understanding to ask better questions, and vice versa for the athlete to ask, or players to ask better questions coming back, that we're actually quite clear on kind of what it measures and how it measures it. I know that can be quite technical, but just from a broad point of view, I think it's important. But using, as I said there, the kind of 3D, which I know you guys have used for a good period of time, and historically it's probably only used for the high-end players through to the professionals that are in the system. But I use my 3D system every single day just in my own coaching, and that's working with club level players, juniors, the whole lot. So one thing that I've found quite interesting is that using something like this quite regular with someone over a period of time, you can actually see how quickly, in a positive point of view, how quickly they can move towards potentially what is good movement, versus, depending on the environment, the conditions, and, all of a sudden you have 3 or 4 days of, quite windy conditions and rain, and how much they can move away from kind of what makes them good players. And so really starting to understand kind of what their movement patterns are and how that works. And then I wrote a note that I think for say use and Golf Finland, it's the earlier you can get exposure for, say, a high performance, junior, to understand kind of their movement patterns, I think is crucial. And then I think as we go along and get sort of the 2 guys that sort of I've got on screen there, the golf pros that I work with and have worked with for 6-7 years, it actually becomes more about them asking us questions. Obviously the guy guy on the left there, the guy who plays on the European Tour, he had some questions on sort of he struggles with right to left putts. and wants to know kind of what changes when he's on a straight putt versus a right to left putt versus a left to right putt, vice versa. The guy on the right, which is, I did a presentation the other week about kind of some of the short game stuff. It's quite interesting, which is something where maybe we'll drill further into some of the short game principles or understandings around kind of what does it take to have a good bunker shot technique, and maybe what are the flaws or what are the patterns to which we probably see already on from a 2D point of view what we see, but to move well in a bunker and to execute a shot well, potentially what are the kind of must do's if there's such a thing to be able to do that. I had a guy, and he'll come up a few times throughout the kind of the session tonight, a young guy, that Lucas Herbert, who won on the European Tour last year. And his coach had a very, very clear thought to kind of how to use 3D. He was a bit hesitant on past experience of what they've done, and he asked me. He said they've been working on some putting stuff, and what he wanted to know, which I thought was quite clever, that similar to there, he wanted to know what he did on a left to right versus right to left, and then a straight putt, and then they had set up some drills that they wanted to do, and actually wanted to measure the drills to see if that actually relates back to what they're trying to achieve on those different type of putts, which I think is a very that's quite a different question. I think it's quite clever that as coaches we look at kind of, okay, well, this player's doing X, and either we've been shown something or we've sort of thought about something that we think that's going to help. I think measuring those drills or those exercises in a training environment like that, I think it's crucial to say, that actually for you that works quite well, or vice versa, that maybe we need to kind of look at something different. So I think sometimes as coaches, I think we get quite prescriptive, where a bit like going to a doctor. You come in, you're feeling not so good, and you have antibiotics. I think we all have our own sort of menu that we've got sort of drills that should work for whatever reason, in regards to kind of how they're moving or whatever it is. But I think it's the more that we can use kind of say TrackMan or 3D to kind of get a really understand does that actually sort of improve the process. I think that's crucial. One thing that we did, I've spent a lot of time on, and it's not fun, and I don't expect that you guys, girls, do this at club level, but I've done a lot of hydration testing with the players I've worked with. I actually got a refract monitor that I used to travel when I was able to travel around the world with, where I actually test the urine samples on the road to make sure that they're at a level where they need to be. One thing we did, this is before the Beijing Olympics, quite a few years ago, we actually purchased a heat tent where we looked at the different sweat profiles of kind of how each athlete would sweat, and then come up with solutions around kind of the best format to keep them hydrated. So we were able to, with this heat tent, we were able to kind of get the temperature to kind of whatever temperature we would like it to be, and then the humidity. So what we were struggling with some of the guys, and probably maybe a little bit similar for you guys as well. We don't get nowhere near as cold as Finland, but our winters can be quite cold. But those guys can go from a winter period being in Australia to then flying to the US in the middle of summer, and how well they adapt to coming out of a winter into the summer, and then what systems or what tools do we put in place to allow them to understand what they need to do to best prepare themselves to be in a hydrated state. So yeah, we spent quite a bit of money on working with Gatorade on this over sort of a couple of month period leading into the Beijing Olympics, which not just the golf athletes, it was actually we tagged along. It was there for the Olympic athletes, but I was able to kind of push our guys through there and get a better idea of kind of how that looked for our guys. And there was one thing that was quite interesting on the back of that. Before Beijing Olympics with the Institute of Sport, we were actually sponsored by Powerade. And on the back of, I'm not saying there might be people who are connected with Powerade, on the back of understanding kind of what was in Powerade versus Gatorade, we left our sponsorship with Powerade, and they actually paid for Gatorade for our athletes for Beijing Olympics, because of the compound and everything that was in there, that was far greater than, I think it had a lot to do with the sugar content, that was far greater than what was going on with Powerade. How something like that would look, there's a result sort of, and I don't expect, it took me ages to kind of go through it and ask many questions, but obviously that's a result page of the kind of the heat testing, and that was allowing us to then to kind of put some systems in place, and using also our dietitian, who was heavily involved in this, to then look at kind of spending time with these athletes to be able to sort of get a better idea of kind of what they need to do on the road versus at home, what's available on the road. So, going to, our players play a lot in Asia. So what's available in Asia that can be close to what we have in Melbourne or in Australia. So just kind of give them, as I said, more of an education of understanding kind of what they need to do to be best prepared for, from a hydrated point of view.
Sorry, Marty, can I interrupt? Can you make the slide bigger? Now it's kind of in a notes mode. So
that one I can't without blurring it. But as say this one here, Hank, is that okay?
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Yeah, there's a couple of slides just because of the screenshots that I took that might look a little bit that way. So this was a spreadsheet this is a tournament we played. We had 5 days in a row plus two days of practice where we play 36 holes a day, where I hydrate. I tested the hydration. I weigh them. We weigh them in the morning. We weigh them at night. We looked at what they consumed, every single day so they had I know everyone's aware of sort of food diaries, hydration diaries. But one of those ones, I think for you, when you're able to be in that environment, in a camp environment or a tournament environment where you've actually got, in the nice way, you've actually got some type of control over kind of what they eat, the times that they do what they do. That's a great environment to be able to educate them around some of this type of stuff. I think in a lot of occasions where you leave them to their own devices, even though the information might be great, but they haven't sort of gone through the process of actually understanding what it is. So that's why I spent many, many years. It wasn't fun traveling urine sample bottles, and I had. I remember being in hotels in the UK and the US, and if the cleaners came in, they must have thought I was dealing drugs or something. There was like swabs, there was bottles, there was all sorts of stuff, and always found that a little bit funny. Nothing that I enjoyed doing, but I think in the long term, it definitely beneficial, because the stuff that we'll go into kind of the next few slides, and kind of how that influence and affects heart rate, and how that influence, and from a mental point of view, from a pre-shot routine point of view, I think all that type of, the fuel in the body, I think is just a massive. This slide right here is some of your coaches might have come across Dr. Matt Bridge, who works out at Birmingham University, close friend of ours, part of our network, and he's heavily involved in developing players, but also him and I have worked a lot in kind of in regards to kind of skill acquisition and benchmarking and training and understanding kind of what influences what. And one thing that we've spent a bit of time on the back of him doing some stuff with us in Australia was where we actually sort of mapped out. So obviously, there's one of the young guys I work with there with a heart rate monitor on. But then put him in a tested environment. I know it's not on the golf course, but a tested environment on the range, where we've come up with skills testing that have outcomes and then measured. So using TrackMan, which I said I'll go a little bit more into in future months about kind of how that was actually done. But then look at different outcomes about putting them and some shot patterns around kind of how they moved into the way they did. And one thing that was quite interesting, which correlates to sports psych that I've worked with now for about 20 odd years back at home, which he's in some ways the science world versus the psych world can have their different thoughts and different opinions, but the reality is there was some direct correlation on kind of what we find from a science point of view and where the psych in regards to kind of pre-shot routine and what the quality of a good pre-shot routine is, and what we looked at. So, you know, that there's a graph that obviously you guys, girls will see a little bit later, kind of what we looked at kind of from an execution point of view. I then on the, actually prior to that as well, I'll go back and tell a story about sort of heart rate. I was one of the first guys back in Australia when I was an athlete. This is a million years ago that when the kind of the heart rate stuff was coming out, I played Australian Masters back here where we put the heart rate monitor on, and I had to put I wasn't allowed to wear the watch on my arm because they thought I was going to get information. So I had to put a watch on the back of my belt. And then download all the information afterwards. And we used some of that GPS tracking then for 4 or 5 years, looking at different athletes with different moments in time, to then allow to look at or have some better questions about kind of how they got to that point. Is it technically related in regards to why they couldn't execute that, why their heart rate went the way that went? Or was it a pre-shot routine point of view, or is it hydration, fuel point of view? So just look, this type of information, like as we was talking about the sports science stuff, it just allows us to pick out certain situations in time, which we pretty much already know from the player. If you watch these guys, girls in tournament golf a lot, you kind of know what they're going to struggle with, but allow some science behind that information to then put some systems in place to be able to work forward on, and then obviously over time then measure against it. This was a fun one and I hope, and just let me know if this works. We did some heart rate mapping. This is a long time ago. You can see how old the TrackMan is, but we did some heart rate mapping around some pre-shot routines, and there were some outcomes on this shot. I just actually found it quite funny. This guy didn't have too much money, and if you missed the green, you had to do another shot, and it come at a cost, and every time you missed the green, it cost him more money. You haven't seen the one on the top right there that and then top left, that like the process behind how we went through it was very, very different. So there's one thing that we did this over a couple of years where we really looked at kind of the quality of a pre-shot routine and how that affect their heart rate. And then that's where we worked closely with, and I'm assuming a lot of because it's been out there for a while now, that brainwave technology, where obviously we measure kind of the intensity level, the focus level. I know there was I don't know how much it's still being used. I think it was the focus band for a period there. This is a different system that the doctor I work with that uses, and we've used this now for 15, 20 years, where we really start to kind of look at kind of he's worked with not just golfers. He works in motorsport, across all a lot of different codes. So he's actually over, 20, 30 years of using something like this. He's got a real kind of really clear benchmark of what is high quality when it comes down to, say, pre-shot routine or the intensity about being able to execute a shot. So we've got some really clear measures on what is that, and then obviously then how we then train for that. I had one of the case studies I talked about the other week, Dave Micheluzzi that I work with, on the back of some of the stuff we've been doing recently, coming back out of COVID, now getting back into tournament golf. The three of us worked for about 3 hours using the brainwave technology, looking at different ways of getting the best results out of pre-shot routine, but also on the range we tested under different conditions, which I said I'll go through into a little bit more detail. This is how it can look. So hopefully, I said, let me know if it doesn't work, but you'll hear some different tones and some birds in the background. So that we obviously I think from a it's a bit like using biofeedback from what you guys currently use in a 3D world, and there's positives around biofeedback as well, but that it gives them a clear understanding of kind of what is the benchmark, or what is the level that they're trying to understand what their pre-shot routine needs to be at. Obviously, you can't use that. We can't get that information unless you're able to provide it for me in tournament level golf. But at least as the coaches, I learn more about understanding what is a high quality routine, working with guys like Dr. Noel Blundell, to then work when I'm on the road to understand kind of what is the level that or what's the minimal sort of look of the level that we need to be able to get these players to be competing at. Another thing that, and potentially you've potentially been exposed to, I know it's been around for a little bit, but we did a lot of stuff with Victoria University. We're fortunate enough because the university, like a lot of universities, they're very financially secure, and they used our athletes of the Institute of Sport as kind of in a nice way test dummies to be able to look at some of the gaze and the quiet eye testing that we did over a sort of 3 or 4 year period. Which for someone from the public would cost, I know I had to pay a few bills along the way. It cost a lot of money to be able to get that type of information. We worked with Derek there that was on the left, that we worked with a couple of the leading kind of skill acquisition guys around that. So some of the stuff we looked at around quiet eye, and I know there's quite a bit of research out there, is effectively, you can see kind of one of the guys that we've got set up there, and we're looking at obviously the Putt Lab around it, but it was more about kind of where they looked and how they looked. And also one thing that's been sort of, not just in golf, but across sports, about kind of where execution is and kind of where the eyes sit in space, which you'll see in this video. This is quite an old video, so hopefully it kind of looks okay. But where that circle is effectively where this guy is looking as he's setting up over a putt. What we're looking for is that, which he does quite a good job here, is when he hits it, there's that little, it's literally just under a second or just over a second, where there's a little gaze where it effectively sits where the ball was. And there's a direct correlation. I know it's in regards to execution, because we know that path and stuff that you would have done with Phil Kenyon over there, you know, over the last couple of years as well. Again, there's a lot of things that influence, obviously the ball going to the hole with, you know, face, path, green reading, you know, baseline technique and everything else. But obviously the level that we're talking to these guys at is then looking further into understanding kind of, once again, what is a high quality routine look like? Where do you look and how you look? Which in general, in most cases, the response has been fantastic. And this is what a kind of a report would look like, where they're measuring, you know, the obviously what you see there, the preparation time versus the backswing versus the downswing. And then the time there, what they call a dwell time, which is the time they spend where the impact is and where their focus is just post impact. So, and I've said I don't, just purely for the cost, and I'm no longer in the system be able to, well, I can still access it, but I've been around it enough now to kind of just understand sort of what type of level of or I have that conversation with the players I work with to know that it's there. But if I had that information, if I had that system in place or that information at hand, I would do it. Well, I don't know if I do it daily, but I'll use it quite frequently with the athletes I've got. One thing I think that on the back of what came of the assessment form is around sort of training and I think one thing that which I love all the technology that we've got available, but one thing that I think I've done I've done something pretty good over my time is creating sort of environments around kind of what is, you know, a high level training environment. And that can be, I'm now doing it even at sort of club level, is kind of providing opportunities to train it. You know, the one thing, a mentor of ours, Ramsey McMaster, talked about, you know, train like a tour pro. You know, there's a lot of players, you know, that they watch golf and they you know, they're all aspiring to be kind of better at what they do and how they do it, and very intrigued about kind of how different people train and how everything else. So one thing that I was really, really big on is kind of working through that. And I've done it from, you know, kids that I actually still work with now, sort of 10, 15 years later, where we started training like from a physical point of view, even in a park next to my golf club, where we looked at different movement patterns and we're crawling up sort of hills and just doing stuff that was quite different to what, you know, these players were exposed to in regards to a lesson. So, you know, a lesson as opposed to a 30-minute lesson or an hour lesson went to 3 or 4 hours of training. And obviously business models need to be able to adjust to kind of make sure that all works. But one thing that was quite interesting very quickly, that a lot of people wanted to be involved and be a part of it. My next slide is I spend a lot of time down on the beach. This is a lot of Ramsey McMaster stuff, which is in regards to obviously posture belt, which I know you've had you know, camps out there where you've had the guys and the girls using the posture belt and whatnot. And we're very fortunate, obviously, weather permitted, we were able to train in a normal sort of back in the day would be there at least once a month, potentially twice a month, where we train on the sand. And we actually we've got a whole heap of different drills that we look at and different movement patterns that we're trying to prescribe to kind of help real benefit their movement, but also more importantly, understanding their movement and training, how that influences potentially their patterns in golf, and getting a correlation. I think the quicker you can get a player to understand, okay, by doing that over there is actually going to help me on the golf course over here. I think the more buy-in, or the quicker you get the buy-in and kind of, okay, well, I can do that at home. I can do that in a hotel room. I can do it kind of anywhere. And given these little tools or little systems that they can use to be able to do that. This is a start of a session that we would normally run. one thing that was interesting, just looking back on this video, our strength conditioning coach that that led the way there, he's now based in Orlando. So he works with effectively traveling athletes or US-based athletes at the moment because no one can really travel. But he started with me many years ago, and one thing that was interesting to the guy that was first behind him and first jumped out the rack there was Lucas Herbert, the guy that won last year on the European Tour. And he was a challenge. He was, I know we've all had challenges in developing and working with players. Unless he saw a benefit in it, there's no chance that he would do anything. And it was interesting going back on some of these videos from the physical point of view. He really saw it, and he's actually even now he still works closely with Luke and ties in and has a massive. Actually, one of the only guys I'd say in Australian golf that actually travels with a physio full time. He's a guy. He's in his mid-20s and has a physio. He's the team that he's created around him and the money that he puts into his own development is quite scary. But obviously he sees the importance of it, and then from a financial point of view, he's justified that by his performances as well. So one thing that we touched on a little bit, I think it was with both Jen and Dave in the previous one, is I know there's many stuff around coaching and training, and I actually look at most of my sessions as training sessions versus coaching sessions. I think coaching to me can be quite restrictive, where it's sort of a bit like going to the doctor. It's X amount and there's drills. I'm very quite curious about putting people in situations where you can expose, their strengths and weaknesses. And then from a high-end point of view, especially with the guys that I'm contracted with, that I actually pretty much measure, I don't want to say measure every one of their shots, but in a training session where we look at kind of measuring and testing, I've got little black books that I keep, and I've got spreadsheets that I work on to measure their shots and look at their dispersions and everything else. And I know we touched on one of these slides quite similar to this, and a normal training session on the range would look like that photo on the right, even though it's a paddock, which is no different to probably many different driving ranges around the world, but pretty much every one of his golf clubs are out of the bag because he's had to choose. On each shot was a different shot with a different outcome and a different result. And there's one thing that I'm sort of, as I said, I've been fortunate to be around sort of, I mentioned before, Dr. Matt Bridge. And actually a lot of this spreadsheet here was actually me spending time with Eduardo Molinari, which for people that are potentially in the room that have heard him talk about, his background, and he's got a double degree in engineering, and his stats background is just, I've never met anyone on the planet that's at that level. Sometimes I used to think that would hinder him, potentially has over his career, but I think for him understanding kind of how to practice and what he needs to do to best perform and obviously keep his job, and I think he does a great job, and I think it really kind of opens our eyes to kind of potentially what we can do with our aspiring tour professionals, down to kind of how do we then benchmark that down to kind of, your club level golfer. And I've actually set up, I would do a lot where, say, a first time client would come in to see me, where I actually set them up with a test to do, and then I film them. I think a lot of time I see a lot of lessons where, the person standing in front of you, it could be on a mat, in a net, whatever it may be, and they're trying to make a golf swing. And a lot of time they're already thinking about whatever the previous lesson or, stuff they've been told or listened to, and they're trying to make a move. And that can look quite different to what that is potentially doing on the golf course. So I actually try to put them into a training environment or an outcome environment where they've got to try and execute a shot. And it could be a draw, it could be a fade, depending on the skill level. And then I actually then film them trying to hit those shots. And ideally, I do it in a way that they actually don't know I'm filming them. I'm just kind of talking through, I want you to 122 meters, whatever it may be, or yards. And then the pin's on the right, and you've got to try and do this, and the outcome is X. And then film and doing that, and then look at their movement patterns while they're trying to execute shots. And I think that's, we all know that kind of as evidence players that kind of what we can do on the range versus what we do on the golf course can be quite different. And that's, to me, is a lot to do with the environments in front of us. All of a sudden, we've got a wind direction we don't like, we've got a lie we don't like, we've got a pin position that we don't like, we've got a hazard, whatever it may be. All these different influences have a massive influence on how you move on the golf course. And I know, and Dr. Mark Bull might have talked about it when he was over there recently, that he did a study years ago where he looked at the movement patterns of, so they were actually looking at, it was actually at Wentworth, and where he got some players where they'd gone to play 9 holes on the driving range. Just to imagine that you're playing the first 9 holes on the driving range. Then they got them then he recorded them playing 9 holes on 3D on the golf course, and then got them to go back to the driving range and try and repeat what they actually did playing those 9 holes on the golf course. And the movement patterns, excuse me, don't want to run out of battery. The movement patterns, arguably, if you looked at the same person doing the 3 different tasks, you could nearly argue there were 3 different people, just how different they moved trying to hit those type of shots, which really then sort of starts to then sort of, for me, question kind of what are we trying to achieve when we're given lessons, and what are we trying to achieve on a driving range when playing the game is so different. And I mean in the nicest way, that driving range that you've seen the picture on there on the right is where I spend most of my time, especially at the moment. And I have a story where if you had someone who never seen golf before and came onto that driving range and watched, say, this guy Dave here hit golf balls, with a bucket of balls to a pole in the distance with one club, and then that same person watched Dave play that later that afternoon on the golf course, you'd argue it's 2 different sports. So my question is to myself all the time and to the coaches that I'm around and I work with, is that how well are we equipping these players that we're trying to sort of, I know there's some baseline fundamentals and the block practice versus, the other, is how well are we putting these people, or how well are we actually sort of training these people to be ready to be able to play, their Wednesday competition at the golf course, or in the guy on the screen's case, tournament golf as a professional. And I think, there's a duty of understanding and duty of care that I think we need to, this is just, once again, my view, it doesn't need to be the whole lesson where we're out doing something like this. There might be some technical information that we need to get done, but also get their mindset into kind of understanding, what does a quality routine look like and feel like? What are some outcome training practices they can do, and go from there. Here's the one on, and use, maybe if you jump in, there's potentially some of the coaches have seen on the one on the left, Dr. Muckbridge and myself worked on this. It took a long time to get to where it is. And one thing that I struggle with is we all have got access to stats and understanding kind of, I talk about it and other coaches talk about, understanding what is good and what is the benchmark that you're trying to work towards. And I think a lot of the players that we work with, it's quite amazing. I know you guys and girls would have had conversations with your clients about their expectations, even if it's into putting. They feel like they're putting badly because they're not holding a 10-foot putt, but not understanding what is the actual, what is the high end tour professional, what are their stats from that position, and really starting out to get them to understand relative to their skill level, what should they be able to hit, and from a dispersion point of view or percentage point of view of kind of how many putts they can hold. So we actually we started with a putting game of just understanding kind of So I guess it's the strokes gained or putts gained about kind of where you should be holing certain amount of putts relative to this is more of a high-end golfer. And then talked about kind of, and this is where a lot of the games that I came up with and talked about with Eduardo Molinari, that understanding kind of where the miss is. So a short side miss versus, so we talked about in position versus out of position. And so we came up with this, the obviously the one on the left there, and it literally it's like a Stableford. I'm assuming everyone understands like a Stableford game where we look at where the player has to hit it to certain stages, certain positions around the golf course, and is required to then, relative to their skill level, hit it to certain positions on the green. And if they were able to execute the shot versus not, there's a consequence and relative to a score. So really start to get them to understand kind of how to move around a golf course. And I used the example of this one. There was a cool story. Years ago, I was working with a guy on the Asian Tour that was doing quite well. He was in the top. Well, he won the year before, so he was quite high up in the order of merit. And then anyway, we started doing some stuff together, and we did a lot of stuff around kind of his course strategy and kind of how to play the game. And really he was in his early 30s and quite, his skill level was quite high. He was able to execute a lot of shots, but he was making a lot of what we'd say silly mistakes. So we spent a lot of time, we actually spent less time working on his technique than getting him to understand kind of how to do this, how to play the game as such, which is quite scary with a guy who's already been a pro for 5 or 6 years. But he went to European Q school and he missed his car by a shot, and then he flew back to Asia to play a golf tournament in Taiwan. And he'd played there the last 3 years. He'd play there, and the best score he had shot was 74. He's obviously missed the cut in the previous 3 years, and he was pretty peeved off about kind of obviously missing his European Tour card by one shot. He didn't want to fly to Taiwan to play this tournament. I just hated the thought of being at a course and a venue where he's obviously never played well. And one thing that he called me about, I said, well, how do I prepare for this tournament? I said, well, you don't like the place. So going out there, playing the golf course and hitting in spots that you've hit it in previous years and knowing what you've done, I don't think that's a good idea. So I said, what I want you to do is I want you to take out this kind of the score sheet and the scorecard. And I want you to walk the course and understand the course for what it's, and the design of the course to understand where to hit it, how to hit it, and how to play the holes that are in front of you in regards to kind of playing the game. And ironically enough, just one of those kind of great stories that doesn't happen very often, but he actually ended up winning the tournament by a shot. So he's gone from never making a cut in 3 years to winning a tournament by a shot, not having a practice round, but actually really mapping out the course and writing the notes. And then on the range, we discussed about the shots and the different shot areas that he knew that he was going to be exposed to, and the different type of shots relative to different wind conditions in Taiwan, to then practice that type of stuff on the range to best prepare him to play that tournament. Now, I said, ironically enough, those stories, have many, many stories that don't go that way, but it was a kind of cool one where he got himself completely out of the kind of the mechanics and the technique of kind of what he was doing, and really sort of understood kind of what he needed to do that week to best perform. So that got me really then spending a lot of time in that space with, you'll see on the right there, is just understanding what tournament golf looks like, and how many different putts you would hit, say in this test here, how many different putts you hit from different from different areas or different distances. One thing that I looked at kind of as just trying to add some pressure to it is that, I talk about kind of making the cut, because I know for tournament golfers, especially sort of early days, being out there, making the cut's important. Obviously, if you're without making the cut, you're not making a dollar. So get him to understand kind of what is the level at Evan in practice that you should be minimal, like from a minimal point of view, that you should be holding X amount of putts out of whatever different distances that we look at, So as I said, I've spent a lot of time, which we'll go more into over the months to come, about some of the different strategies or some of the different way that I've come up with, kind of measuring those areas and then implementing them into kind of what it looks like from training. I know there's a Mark Brody, and for a lot of the coaches have read his book, that there's a lot of good information there about different skill level players, about what they should be able to do, which I know you can use. But I think, so from my point of view, I think that I've moved that way now for a long period of time, where I'm really actively, and it's been a nice way of being at home for the period that I've had to look at and work with more sort of, I'm not working with the high-end golfers, but I've worked with more club level golfers than I've done in the past, and then coming up with strategies about trying to help them in regards to their own practice and the time that they do have, best coming up with kind of ways of getting better. And I know I've talked a lot, which I'm supposedly I've been told I'm very good at, or I'll just do a lot of it. And my favorite slide of all, and this is where you guys, girls, have to talk, because that's my goal for 2021, is as many questions I can get, the better it is. And more importantly, I think for all of us that, and especially going forward, and the questions don't have to be, and that might be an email that's sent to Hank or myself or Yusi. There might be questions that don't need to be said tonight or asked tonight. But more importantly, over the next sort of period of time, I think that the more that we can communicate with each other, and there's stuff there that you guys got on your mind that if I don't have the answer to at the moment, I'll definitely do whatever I can to tap on the resources that I've got to see if I can come up with some solutions around those type of questions. So I guess more importantly, thank you for your time. Thank you for having me involved, and I look forward to doing a lot more over the next few months. And I guess more, I guess the real important stuff is, everyone stay safe, and hopefully this COVID stuff allows us to move around the world and get back to kind of what we love and do well on a day-to-day.
Cheers, Matty. I had a couple of questions, a few pages of notes yet again, but I guess one of the kind of, to kick it off, I mean, as a percentage, I mean, we kind of asked coaches regarding kind of sports science, medicine, all that kind of stuff. I mean, for you, how big a part of the overall picture is that in player development? Like what value would you put on that?
Sports science, sports medicine.
Yeah. Bearing in mind, obviously it's kind of a wide topic area, and you guys are great resources. And I guess you could argue we also have them here at our disposal. So I mean, in terms of developing a player, I mean, what kind of value would you put on it?
I would say, I think I said earlier, I think the earlier that you can expose that type of information, the better. Even though it might send the head spinning a little bit with even the home coach and maybe potentially the support system around their parents and whatnot. But I think it's a bit like kind of the psych stuff we talk about. I think the earlier that we can get profiling done, the more we understand the person, what they do, what they've been exposed to. I think what we don't want to do is get someone who's 18, 19, 20. It's a bit like, I think we talked about in previous ones, we talk about strength training, where you talk about your training age, all of a sudden this player's playing at a great skill, but their physical component, they're a beginner level. So how well can we expose these type of elements to what would be high performance? So, when they are 18, 19, 20, early 20s, whatever it may be, that they've had some information around that, they're aware of that. Some of that stuff, they go, I actually don't, that's not for me. but I think it's our kind of duty or call to expose these type of areas, because one thing we find is then all of a sudden they get on tour and the circus and the noise that's out there, which I've talked about in the past, and all of a sudden this coach says this, or this, trainer goes, well, have you done eye testing before? And it's like, oh, I've never heard of it. And all of a sudden now the player is already great to be there, is now questioning, okay, well, how come I haven't done that? How come UC didn't expose me to this type of information? So it's not saying that you need to push them with all this type of information, and do it in a manner where it best fits and the best time it fits. One thing that I said, I actually wrote a note from the other night for you, Use, and one thing that I really I struggle with a little bit there at the end there, especially around some of the camp environment, is that you can put the best people in the room, and these guys are, they're our peers, and that we want to be around them. Everyone feels important because what they have to say is, what's important to them right now. But if you go back to that model of what we said, athlete first, and I've had some pretty deep conversations around some of the guys I've worked with, is that I get it, the information's great, but that information is not ready. It's not quite ready for that player right now. As long as we're completely aware of kind of what is the athlete needing, which I think that's where the home coach and yourself Use is so, or the PJ members are so important, is we become the filter of understanding what is required, or what is best needed for that person in front of us. And I think that's something that we probably don't look as coaches enough at, is how important that is, that, that person reaches out to us for information. And I think we need to best understand that person through using sports science and sports medicine to go, okay, what's the best pathway, or what is this person ready to be exposed to, and maybe not ready to be exposed to?
Yeah.
One question from me, that what in the end you mentioned that you've been working a lot more with the club level players. Any kind of big discoveries there that are maybe kind of you made, or kind of make you wonder or change your way of kind of coaching them?
I tell you what, I've found that my teaching, my technical thoughts and principles haven't changed. And one thing I've found that I've had a lot of success is that, and I'm not picking on some of the coaches that work in my academy, where they're quite reactive to a person's doing X, and they come up with a strategy or a drill to be able to get them away from whatever that pattern is. But I look at movement as movement, and if Hank, you were standing in front of me right now having our first lesson versus, we've worked for 10 years and you're playing on the US tour, I don't look at you any different. I look at how well you stand, how well you moved, what are the cause and effects. And I will work through, obviously at different levels relative to their skill levels, but I'm still working through my own fundamentals that I think is important, that I've done over a period of time. And it's been, in a nice way, it's been quite cool to actually do that now with club level golfers and watch, because obviously they work off a handicap system and watch their handicaps drop down, that they're quite, I don't know enough about the handicap system, and I don't really get too far into it. I just look at someone who's standing in front of me trying to, execute a shot. And it's been quite interesting to see how well some of the guys and girls have kind of performed over a period of time, working on the same philosophy of how I see movement, and no real different to how I train a tour pro. And I remember on the flip side of that for you there, Hank, that I thought years ago when I did my apprenticeship, and we're allowed to start coaching, I got junior clinics, and all of a sudden now I'm teaching 4 and 5-year-old kids, and I'm teaching all these kids. And for most people, most people my age are like, well, this is the crappy job where we've been given this job to teach kids. But I actually flipped on and said, I thought if I can get these kids to understand my thoughts and and educate these kids that at their age and their different skill level, that I can work with pretty much anyone on the planet. So trying to get a kid to understand, I've actually got a 5-year-old girl that I work with, and the conversations that, and an 8-year-old boy that he's on 3D every other, like the conversations that we have, because he's been exposed and these girls have been exposed to this type of stuff is quite amazing. And they're, in a nice way, they're excelling at their age, and they're going very, very well. And, you know, I like to think that I think the better information we can give them, as I said to you, at a younger age, as they go through life and get exposed to different information, they're in a better situation to go, you know what, that's not me and that doesn't work for me. Or yes, I can see how that relates back to kind of what my coach has said in the past, and yep, that works for me, and I can do more of that.
In your opinion, is the information provided to the players, is it or is it too much? Because with the social media, that is kind of, people struggle because they don't know what to kind of believe in, and they're kind of all the time searching for different answers. So
yeah, I think the social media, and I'll be interested in everyone's thoughts on this. I try to avoid it. I actually don't look at very little golf stuff in social media. The only stuff I look at, the stuff that I'm interested in, and even that in itself, I've spent less time in the last 12 months looking at social media. But it is quite amazing the amount of clients that come into, in for a session that they said, oh, have you heard about this guy? And I'm being fortunate enough to be, around, I'd say, some of the best coaches on the planet for a good period of time. I'm yet to hear someone come into a lesson going, oh, have you heard what Pete Cowan said on Instagram? Or, Phil Kenyon said this on Instagram. It's like all these random people that I've never even heard of that become, social media famous and have, brought out different ideas and different thoughts, and, obviously it can be quite different to kind of our own stuff. But I think I've said it before around kind of noise and distraction. I think a lot of that stuff is really dangerous. And then the best coaches that I'm around, pretty much the best coaches I'm around, aren't posting any of that type of stuff. I'm not saying, obviously there's people in the room that if that's part of your business, please do it. But obviously, I understand that I like the idea that content's good and everything else. But I really, this is just me personally, I really struggle with some of the stuff that's out there and some of the conversation. I know you and I have had, some of the stuff with the group chat, some stuff that's come up over periods of time where it's just wrong. It's just, you shouldn't be allowed to put some of that stuff out there. But you know what? If it keeps people playing golf and keeps people involved, I think it's, on the brighter side, it's probably a good thing. But I think, got to be very cautious of kind of what you put out there.
Any question from the group? Comments you can ask also in Finnish. Don't have to be shy. There's one.
Where's your main findings? Oh, I just missed that. Main findings from
on the hydration tests.
Yeah. So basically, we pretty much, if I look real general, we as humans pretty much live dehydrated most days, and we actually function quite well in regards to kind of what our day requires. On the lesson tee, we can kind of go through, being dehydrated and still sort of execute a lesson and everything else. But at a higher level, we talk about the 1%ers and everything else. What I find is in a general day, what we'd look at is that your body can consume 1 liter of water an hour. So anything outside that, it just turns to waste. So you end up needing to urine or needing to go to the toilet more often. So what I would look at is in the morning, which it starts the day before. So whatever the test is or test result is in the morning, understanding kind of where that benchmark is. If they're 3 hours away from performing, I'd put a strategy in place to try and get them back to being hydrated by their tea time. So that could be a combination of using, say, Gatorade or Hydrolyte. I use Hydrolyte more now, or water, but also then making sure that they're only having enough where they're not feeling like they've got to go to the toilet the whole time. And then basically on that is on the golf course is so you look at the roughly, you look at sort of 1 liter an hour. I had a thought years ago that between the first green and the second tee, you have a drink. So in between, consciously kind of become a routine and a habit that it's a bit like putting your putter in the bag. When you've walked off the first green, you grab your drink bottle and you have a drink. So you consciously, or over time, that becomes a habit that you just keep doing it sort of, somewhat religiously. Depending on how long you're out there, depends on how much fluid you use. What we generally find is you need to. So then the evening time is quite interesting because most people, if they've kept themselves in a hydrated state, the things that really that give a false reading is orange juice, alcohol, and soft drink. If you've had any of those kind of 3 things on a hydration test, you can nearly say it's a false read. So if you had especially alcohol or soft drink, so avoiding what stuff that we've had on the road where they literally water was the only option for dinner. Avoiding any type of soft drink or alcohol or juices. And the other thing you got to look at is people try to be hydrated, so they're constantly sort of through the evening trying to sort of drink more, so they wake up in a hydrated state. I like the idea that if you've done a good job, you should have really finished kind of drinking by 7:30, because I think that if you're chasing your tail by that time, what then happens is they end up needing to go to the toilet through the night, which actually then massively affects your sleep, which affects your recovery, which, that's stuff that we can talk about at a later date as well. So understanding kind of what you do sort of literally every hour of the day to make sure you're going to bed best prepared, then wake up relative to your tea time, that you're going to be in a hydrated state and good to go. But it's one of those ones. I think what you'll find is the more often that I've especially done it, say use in a team environment, they generally all will, and obviously flying on planes is just horrendous for hydration, or being dehydrated. But you find that in the team environment, they all start poorly, and then nearly becomes a competition of who can get the lowest score. It's like they're trying to shoot a score on the course. They're worried about, like they got they're fist pumping because they got they got the lowest score on the day, and that's. But what you do is that you then go, okay, well, that's the level that you need to be. And pretty much everyone, I don't know if you've done it for us coaches, done it yourself. It's quite amazing how much more you really need to drink to be able to keep yourself in that hydrated state. And then that's not taking, humidity and different temperatures. And the other stuff that affects you massively is, especially say for you guys, like now where, you sleep with, say, potentially, big doonas or your beds are heated, or the area that you are, is that's dehydrating you. And then a lot of times when it's cold, because you're not exerting any moisture or anything else, that you actually don't feel like drinking. So I think the important thing is coming up with whatever that habit is. If it's between shots, or it's what I said as a rule of thumb, sort of from the first green to second tee, from the second green to the third tee, just, constantly just sort of making sure that you drink your way through it.
Cool. Something I wanted to just touch on as well, Marty, kind of creating a training environment. I mean, obviously we're, where you are, it's kind of, you're pretty blessed with, sunshine 24/7, 365, more or less. A lot of one of the big challenges we have is working in indoor environments.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's probably something that we'll touch on a little bit more in kind of in the coming months, but I mean, any thoughts you have on it? I mean, I know you saw it in Iceland when you went there, and you've kind of somewhat similar situation here. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, what can we do as coaches then to, bearing in mind the environmental constraint, to actually create, as you call it, a training environment versus a practice environment?
Well, I think it's quite easy to go, things are too hard. We can't, because of our current, or our living arrangements, we, it's all too hard. But I think, it's a bit like when I looked at my driving range, I don't like the look of my driving range because it doesn't look like a golf course. So I've really worked very hard over the years to come up with different strategies and different thoughts about how to put these players in a mind state that they feel like they're actually playing golf. And I think from an indoor facility point of view, which I've done, as I've sort of spent a lot of time in Belgium. I know it's not nowhere near, the same as you guys, but, the weather's can be quite restrictive in regards to what you're able to do indoor versus outdoor. But using some of the information and the stats that we've got, say TrackMan, if that's available, some of the launch monitors stuff, that we can set up games where there's outcomes, as opposed to trying to make golf swings to try and find numbers. You actually, there's a time to, I think I talked about, the calibration stuff as well. I think there's a time to, you calibrate whatever that, short game, full swing, whatever part of the game you're looking at, but then there needs to be an element of kind of testing whatever that is. And there needs to be some outcomes. And then that there, to me, becomes better conversations back to the home coaches, you guys as, within the association and stuff like that, okay, I've had this, I've had a month here that I've been working on this, and there's my results, even though you see, the problem is because you can't get on a golf course, you don't see what the true result is, but you should be able to understand the players' movement patterns and the certain shots that they're going to struggle with, and set up games and strategies to put them in those situations, to allow them to come back to you and ask questions about how come I can't hit that shot. Because at that point in time as a coach, you go, okay, now they're ready to listen. You know what I mean? That every time I try to hit that shot, it goes 20 yards right. And now you go, okay, well, you know what? Your 3D information, I can see why that shot's a struggle, because you do whatever. You guys will come up with whatever that is. So I think, that's something that obviously you and I are going to talk a lot more into over the next few months, is coming up with, some of those sort of games or tests and strategies about kind of how you can do that from, an indoor point of view. And then how does that look then when obviously things open up and the sun comes out and you're able to get back out on the course? Or you have players that obviously you're still able to move around the world a bit too. So you have players that are out in Dubai or going to Spain to train, giving them, all of a sudden, that's great that they're doing that, but how are they training? They go, I just want to get out of Finland because it's cold and I can't do this, I can't do that. Well, that's great that you're over in Dubai, but what are you actually doing over there? And giving them some tools to be able to sort of work through that as well.
Brilliant.
So basically, if I understand correctly, is that you have to kind of always keep the task in mind, even if you're indoors or outdoors. If you kind of lose the task or the focus, that why are you hitting this shot? You're kind of lost. So you're kind of working on the movement, but the movement doesn't kind of attach to the task or how do you play the game.
Yeah, spot on, Hank. That's perfect. I think if you understand, as you say, I know stuff that I would imagine Bully would have talked about the other month about kind of internal focus and external focus and kind of what is your purpose to what you're actually doing. And yes, say use works with a player on 3D or Bully works with a player on 3D. This is tagged. These are things that you need to work on. That needs to be put in a situation and in a part of the training environment that person's allowed at their own time to kind of work through whatever that may be. But then there needs to be a separation from that then to, okay, well, now that I've kind of worked through that, how does that then hit into, say, indoor facility, hit into a net? How is there some outcomes about kind of how that then feels when I'm trying to execute shots? Because the unfortunate part right now, unless you have that, you're waiting until golf opens up again. That to me is way too, like, that's so much time wasted that there could be so many conversations between now and then that you could be miles ahead of where you could be than waiting for as I said, to be able to either travel somewhere else or to be able to get back out on the golf course.
Amen.
Any more questions?
Disappointed.
No.
It's a strike. It's a strike. 2021. That's the first strike.
Mate, it's only January. Come on, we've got a few more months left.
I'm going to get on a boat. I'm going to smuggle myself out of Australia, and I'll get over there for questions.
Yeah. Please do.
Might take me for a bit.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, just kind of for a couple of weeks' time, and we've got we're going to chat to Kevin Kirk. I mean, he's kind enough to give us some of his time as well from Palm Springs. I think he said he was going to be in, right?
Yeah.
He's actually going to be in the middle of a PGA Tour event where he's going to discuss a little bit about kind of how he's developed a system of working with players and a team approach. So I think bearing that in mind, I think it would be useful then to kind of maybe have a think about as to what you might want to ask Kevin as well. I mean, he's probably one of the most approachable individuals on planet Earth, and completely kind of, he's a rock star without being a rock star.
He's our rock star.
Yeah, but in the sense that he's very open about what he does, and obviously having worked with players like Patrick Reed and Jonathan Vegas, Graham McDowell, Lexi Thompson, Stacey Lewis in the past. I mean, he's got a lot of pedigree in what he's done, so he can kind of give his perspective on this theme, and it would be great to actually maybe have a think about things you might want to hear Kevin talk about as well.
Yeah, I guess personally, Kevin's one of my closest friends, and I would argue one of the best coaches, not just in golf, but coaches on the planet. And it's really interesting. I've been fortunate to be around his journey from he came out to Australia a long time ago. So I've been fortunate to be around him now for a long period of time, and even how much he's grown and developed as a human and with the players that he's been able to work with. And so for the guys, for the coaches that are involved in this, it's an absolute must. And I'm fortunate that I'm able to pick up the phone and listen to him talk like you can, but it's just, you sit there and just listen for that reason, because there's just so much gold there. And I think from a private point of view, I think what's from a PGA point of view for you there, Hank, there's what has this guy done? Because he's done it very different from, say, working with associations, because golf in America don't work through associations and stuff. It's very much a private enterprise, and how he's formed his business and how he's gone about developing athletes privately to then go on to then work with some of the best players in the world for now 10, 15 odd years. It's been very, very impressive to watch.
do you think it's a good idea for all the participants joining that maybe send some questions before?
Please.
So we
Any
could go through that
questions?
stuff.
Any questions would be good.
Can you see how desperate he is for questions? Come on, people, wake up.
That's all right. No, but I mean,
yeah, no, I think it's an opportunity missed if if there's something that's on your mind that you in regards to that space, or even from a business point of view, how did he go about? I know he's done it where he's based out of the Woodlands in Texas. How he had to work with a company that owned the golf course about kind of structuring his business and the other coaches around him. So even that type of stuff, which could be quite interesting for the coaches that are involved as well.
Cool.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It's Jenny here. I have a question about the club players. How would you motivate? Any tips how to motivate them for the physical practice or exercise? Even though I've done the TPI tests and explained how it affects and how it would help them, they are still not like very keen into it. They're just like, hey,
Quick fixes.
I know it would be important, but I'd rather still do the golf practice by swinging or hitting the ball.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I was involved with TPI, especially at early stages, early days of TPI. But my thought around some of that stuff's kind of moved a little bit in a different direction over years and years of my exposure. But I think what you'll find is that there's people that are. I find it's quite interesting. There's people that are actively doing a lot of things that you don't know they're doing, like they've seen a physio or they've seen a personal trainer or they've seen that type of stuff. So as I said earlier, that building that connection make a little team between the three of us type of thing, between the coach, the player, and it could be a physio, or it could be a PT or S&C coach, or whatever it may be. And then like I've done, I think, and I've had to try and get myself more back into shape because of this. I've actually, I've got a few little tests that I think that's kind of important in kind of what helps you move, say, through your hips, through your pelvis, what helps you move through kind of thorax, that, just to expose them to some basic sort of movement stuff, even within a session, to go, you know what, I can see how that's a struggle here, and kind of how you move by potentially getting better at this. I believe it's going to help you. And I'm very big to say I actually don't know. This is just, I've just been fortunate to be around a lot of physios and chiros and different coaches and strength conditioning coaches around the world. But there's a few things there that I think is kind of important in regards to some of the movement stuff. I know probably Bully brought that up when he was over there previously. And then potentially within my sessions, I spend time moving through some of that type of stuff, just see how you go, try and feel this, and then let's see how you go now trying to move that way. So, but as you know, Jenny, there's people that just aren't interested, and all they want is to buy the new driver and buy the golf swing, buy a coach that tells them how good they are, and the quick fix. But that's society. That's what we've got in life. But I think it's up to you kind of staying true to kind of your own education, what you've done with TPI and and different things you've been able to see around sort of over your own time, to go, you know what, I think this could really help that person. And if they're not willing to take it on board, I guess, well, we can't do much about it. I know it's hard and it's frustrating, and you kind of go, if you just do a little bit of that, it's going to make it so much better. But it is tough that way.
Yeah, maybe it's just about the communication.
Yeah, which is good that you're actually communicating with me right now, unlike everyone else that's not. That's another smack.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Jenny.
But again, I think, with the work you do with young players as well, I mean, that's one way of kind of sending a subliminal message to older players, is that, look, okay, this is an everyday part of what we do as kind of development players. So I don't know, it's just a thought.
It is interesting though. Like if you think of most people who play different sports, and obviously you guys are, brought up in different sports to what we are back in Australia, but most sports have a physical and there's something physical about it that, it takes a warm up, it takes a stretch, it takes, to play football or, whatever it may be. You're active, you need to kind of move a certain way. But it's quite interesting that, there's a lot of club level golfers that they're just in their mind, they're happy to jump out of the car running late to the tee and jump on the first tee and play the first 6 holes horrible until they sort of get to a point where they're warming up without having that, but that's, as I said to say Jenny before, that same person probably does the same thing in business as well. Runs late to a meeting, not ready, works his way through it until a point where he feels like he's got something. I think it's kind of just shows us as people as well.
Yeah, one comment is that I think we discussed it together on Sunday, is that people's expectations are that they gain results really in a quick time period. So when they start like New Year's resolutions, you can see the first 2-3 weeks the gyms are full of people, and then it kind of you can see the amount of people dropping off. So they kind of think, okay, if I do this for 2 weeks, then I should expect quick results. Of course if you do a good workout, you get some results, but still it takes a lot of time. So maybe going back to Jenny, the communication is to communicate to people that it takes time. That don't be frustrated if you don't get good results in 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to take a little time, and then kind of make it approachable. So make all the exercises really simple, because my experience, I used to do the TP as well, like probably over 10 years ago, it was the programs the people got from the TPSI were really complicated, and that was one of the reasons that people didn't do it, because they were too complicated. And then I started working with the physio and make it more simple, more approachable, that you could do it like 10 minutes before golf practice, do 5 different movements, and people realized, okay, it doesn't take that much time. It's really simple, and they start seeing results, which kind of opened the window to the next level. So, okay, we can do more complicated stuff. They started doing more exercise by themselves and kind of make it easy at first and small results as expectations. And
I couldn't agree more. And I think the important part there is, I think I've talked about as well, as kind of in a nice way building that team environment. I mean this in the nicest way. I've been so fortunate to be around some of the best in that physical area, or people around the world. But I'm very, very early days. I thought I kind of knew it all, and I realized the more I talk to these guys, the less I actually know. And I just go, you know what? I think the important part is that I mean this in the nicest way, we all stay in our lane. Okay, I'm a golf coach that is I'm across a lot of things, but I know what I'm really good at. And if I see something that's from a physical point of view, I'm going to make sure I've got a network of people that I can lean on to kind of have those conversations. And I think it goes back to Evan, Jenny, what you said before is that I think it's sort of like, Evan, just think about it yourself. All of a sudden you go to learn how to play whatever sport, and all of a sudden the coach goes, if you're really interested in this, I'd recommend potentially you go see this person over here who's a physio, who's quite specific around kind of your needs and what you need to do. You kind of go straight away, wow, this guy actually, he's actually thinking about me, and providing me, someone he trusts to kind of give me that type of information. And I think the more that we can kind of, once we talked about that networking around kind of who we work with and how we work with, and I think what Hank said there is spot on. All of a sudden, something that could be quite complicated, not taking anything away from TBI, but then go into a physio, and the physio goes, you know what, you just need to do these 3 things here really well. And then once you feel like you've got those 3 things there, in 3, 6, 8 weeks time, come back and see me, and we'll revise that, and then start looking at doing things, and maybe a little bit more advanced. and they, once again, it's a bit like they're their own golf development. They can actually see that there's progression to what they're trying to do. They don't need to do everything right now. This is going to move through different stages as I continue to grow and develop. And then, as I said, working with those type of people over a long period of time, I think it's really important.
I mean, I don't know if this is going to be of any use to anyone, but from Thursday of this week, Thursday to Sunday, we've got a kind of 4-day Team Finland get together at Vierumäki. So we've got some of our physical trainers and staff there. So if anybody is interested in coming along to have a look at what they do, get some ideas, because we specifically designed it so that in the morning we've got some activation both for brain and body before we start practice, and then kind of early afternoon there's a physical session where we're going to have a lot of kind of movement based exercise. We're going to have a lot of balance control, those kind of things for the players. So anybody wants to come along and watch that there, just get in touch. You're more than welcome.
I'd come if I can get there, but I can't. You can video for me. What a great opportunity. Yeah, and that's.
Yeah, because we got, one of our, just before you come to JP's question, I mean, one of the our physio, he's met Ramsey and worked with Ramsey, so he's going to do a lot of work.
I met him.
Matti, yeah. So around kind of posture and body activation. So it might be of use to the coaches in the room who might know more about it.
Yeah.
You think you see a chance to get it through online or part of it?
Potentially, yeah.
Because with the restrictions with the COVID and stuff like that, it might be great. Even we could get Marty online to watch it. So
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Log me in.
Yeah, let me see what I can do.
It doesn't have to be the whole thing, but just if some sessions, it would be great, because I think it is one kind of the big questions is how do we get the national team players, coaches more involved. They might have stuff going on with their family or work that they can't get on the camps. So if we can better the communication that way as well, I think it's a big plus and positive results. So because with all the technology we have nowadays, that we can do stuff online, if that's a possibility, I think that would be great.
I think that's the interesting thing about the whole COVID stuff. Isn't it funny? All this technology has been here for years. It's taken COVID to work out that we could actually do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty mad that, we've, just in all, like, as everyone in the room has got people in all different platforms and different, working in different environments. They've gone, the reality is the platforms have been here forever. We just haven't utilized them. And now, you're right there, Hank. It's an opportunity to kind of, okay, well, there's no excuses why we can't connect more and expose ourselves to different information that we potentially weren't able to do because of time restraints or work commitments.
There's one question, Marty, on the chat from JP. Can you see it?
Oh, okay. Here we go. Now I worked out how to do this. It's been around for years. I've just worked out how to do it. Good question. Starford game it's a bit like strokes gained relative to a tournament. So depending on the one thing you'll work out, if we had say a group of 4 playing on a certain day, it'd be all relative to how hard the conditions are on that day. So depending on the wind and the course and everything else. So the stroke gain can vary, or the Starford points can vary relative to the course you're playing and the conditions you're playing. So it gives you more of an accurate stroke gain relative to the players on the day versus. So you could have that game playing on a say what we call here a public golf course, which is anyone can play, short course, versus say a Royal Melbourne in the middle of summer. those point systems are going to be very, very different relative to that. So one thing that we kind of worked out is that it's all relative to that skill level on that day. But in general, anything in the positives is generally doing pretty good from that, if that makes sense, JP. Yes.
Silence is agreement. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. And that's something we'll go more into in over the next couple of months as well. You know, we'll get more into kind of what that looks like, and I know Yus has got pretty much most of my stuff, so we can provide that type of information over to the coaches as well, so they can, in a nice way, play around with it and come up with. Obviously, you can't get on the course with some of the stuff, but play around with some ideas and maybe improving it as well.
Yeah, I've yeah, you've let me kind of borrow it, a lot of it, and I've kind of I've amended it to kind of into different versions. So I'm happy to share that as well with how we use that with some of the players, and particularly when we're training outdoors. So happy to go through that.
Yeah.
Great.
No, that's great.
Brilliant.
Anything else before we stop for the day?
Day hasn't even started yet. Stop yet.
You just woke up.
Yeah.
You just don't. I've got to organise dinner now. So your day hasn't started. I've got to work out some dinner.
There you go.
I guess I said more importantly, thanks for everyone checking in, and I think I like to think everyone, every sort of presentation we do, has a different theme and a different purpose to it. And I know having, and I know I'm biased because he's one of my close friends, but everyone involved needs to listen to kind of what Kevin's got to say. If you heard him before, you need to listen to it again, because I think there's some absolute, gold nuggets there in regards to what he's been able to do over the journey he's had, but also even from your own business point of view, kind of how he's been able to structure and set up some stuff. So I think, Hank, if the guys and girls could, if they've got some questions, I know questions can be challenging at times. That's another spec. I think it's I know I'm going to be asking. I'll ask questions on the day as well, because there's always something that comes up. Sort of, he says something that provokes your thought, or that you need some clarity around kind of why he does and how he does it. So, but for everyone, I guess more importantly, stay safe and thanks for your time.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Marty.
Marty.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody.
And if, like I said, if you have any questions before the next webinar to Kevin Kirk or to Marty, or please send them to my email or Jussi's email or Teemu's email. So just please, all the questions you might have lined up, so just send them so we can get the conversation going on.
That's great.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Bye.